computer. All right, so I'm going to share screens over here. Excuse me. Hope you all had a nice weekend. Okay, what kind of questions did you have on the homework?
Wait, can you go over question 17?
17, absolutely.
Yeah.
17, we have 4a squared. Is this showing up, my friends?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So if we recall, whoops. If you recall, we have 4 terms. So we're going to look at the first 2 terms. We're going to say, okay, it looks like I could factor a 2 and an a out of both of those. If I factor 2 out of 4, I'm left with 2. If I factor an a out of a squared, which is AA, is just going to give me a. If I factor a 2 out of 10, I'm going to be left with 5, and the a already factors out. Then I'm going to look at my next 2 terms. So this sign's going to come down. Looks like a 7 is going to work. If I factor a 7 out of 14a, I'm left with 2a. If I factor a 7 out of 35, I'm left with a 5. And then these are in common, so I'm going to write that once. And in the other set of parentheses, I'm going to write whatever I have left, including the signs. So 2a plus 7, so that's factored. Does that make sense, Mohammed?
Yeah, it does. I got it right. I was just double checking.
Sweet, good idea. I like it. Any other questions we have, my friends? Okay, so you should have the notes from last time. Go to the last pages. I believe that's it, PEF number 9. Correct? You all have that? If you don't have it, just write this down on a sheet of paper, and this is being recorded. So we are starting with our factoring. So right now I have 3 terms. Does everyone agree there's 3 terms? Does that make sense? So in front of my x, theoretically, I have the number 1. Agree? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the very last term times the first time. So 4 times 1 gives me 4. Then I'm going to take a look at my signs. Okay. I have this last one being positive. And in order to get a positive number, you multiply a positive and a positive, or a negative and a negative. This other sign here, being it's negative, is going to direct us to say, I know that both of my signs, when I split this into 4 terms, both have to be negative. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about, how do I get 4 by multiplying? So I know they'll both be negative. So I know that 1 times 4 and 2 times 2 give me the same thing. Being that both signs are going to be negative, if I had negative 2, if I add these together and they were both negative, I would get that negative 4. Is that okay so far? Okay, so basically we're doing a few things, and this is going to be the same routine on every problem. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these 2 and I'm going to put an X with both of them. And that's going to take my 3 terms and it's going to make me 4 terms now. Does that make sense? Now that I have 4 terms, I can do the grouping method that we learned. What can I factor out of both of those? I can factor an X out, and that leaves me X minus 2. This sign's going to come down. And I'm going to factor a -2 out of both of those. So if I factor a 2 out, if I factor a -2 out of -2x, I'm left with positive. If I factor a -2 out of +4, that makes it negative. So notice the sign changed. So on a side note, think about if I were to distribute here and here, and I were to distribute here and here, do I get my 4 terms back? And the answer is yes. So once I do that, I realize I have those in common. And then my other set of parentheses is whatever I have left, including the signs. So this, if I were to double distribute or FOIL it back together, would give me x squared minus 4x plus 4. So things that you need to realize, you need to make sure you put a 1 there. If no other numbers there, you have to realize you multiply the last and the first together. Okay. And that's kind of how we go it. Okay, so let's go slow. You stop me when you have a question. Can I move to the next slide?
Yeah.
Okay. Next slide. First thing I look at, I have 3 terms. I want to make 3 terms turn into 4 terms. So I'm going to multiply the very last number. I'm going to multiply here. Okay, so -3 times 2 is -6. And in order for me to multiply 2 numbers together to make it negative, I know I have to have one positive and one negative, because a positive times a negative or a negative times a positive would give me a negative answer. Then I have to think about, what do I multiply together to get 6? Well, I know 1 times 6, and I also know 2 times 3. Okay, so now, of these two, 1 is positive and 1 is negative. Okay, so if I pick these right here and I make a -6 and a +1, if I combine together +6 and or -6 and +1, do those add together to give me -5? You agree? Okay, so I'm going to use those. I'm going to put an X with each of them. And now I'm going to bring down my first term, which is 2x squared. And I'm going to put in whatever order I want, but make sure the signs come with it. And then I'm going to bring down my last term. So if I went +1 minus 6, I'd get the -5. But what this did is this allowed me to get 4 terms. Okay, so I have 4 terms. So of these first 2 terms I look at, I have an x in common. And if I factor an x out of 2x squared, I'm left with 2x. If I factor an x out of 1x, I'm left with a 1. This sign's going to come down. I can factor, it looks like a -3. If I factor a -3 out of -6, that gives me a +2x. If I factor a -3 out of -3, my placeholder is +1. Notice those are the same. That's what we want. If they're not the same, it's not going to factor. So then I get 2x plus 1 and x minus 3. If I multiplied that together, I double distributed or FOILed, I would get the 2x squared minus 5x minus 3. Questions about what I've done? Seem okay? And this is going to be the same exact routine each and every time. Okay? Can I move on, my friends? Okay, next term, we have 3 terms. We want to make it 4 terms. So I'm going to multiply this times this, and that's going to give me a -12. In order to get a negative number when multiplying together, I know one's positive and one of them's negative. And I think about what 2 numbers multiplied together give me 12. Well, 1 and 12 works, 2 and 6 works, and 3 and 4 works. So only one combination of those, one being positive, one being negative, would give me the negative 11. So I think this is going to work. I'm going to have a negative 12 and a positive 1. Okay. If I add positive 1 and negative 12 together, I get negative 11. That's what I want. So in whatever order I want, I'm going to write down what I just found. So I get that. So now I have 4 terms. B and I have 4 terms. I can say, what do I have in common between those? I have an x, and that leaves me 2x plus 1. This sign comes down. I can factor out a negative 6 out of both of those. If I factor a negative 6 out of negative 12, that gives me a positive 2. If I factor a negative 6 out of negative 6, that gives me a positive 1. Notice these match. And then whatever I have left is going to go in my other set of parentheses. Again, if I double distributed or I foiled those together, I'd wind up with 2x squared minus 11x minus 6. Not too bad, is it? Questions for me?
Wait, yeah. So like, do we just like forget about the negative on 11?
So the 11, I don't forget about it. What I do is I multiply the first and the last together and figure out what 2 numbers I would multiply together. In this case, one being positive and one being negative, that when I add them together, when I add these, those give me this.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Oh, I get it now. Yeah.
Yeah, if I chose the 2 and the 6, I can't get it to a negative 11. I chose the 3 and a 4, I couldn't get there. So
Oh, makes sense.
the 1 and the negative 12 are the ones that work. Okay. Good question. All right. Next question. I have 3 terms. I'm going to multiply the first and the last together. That gives me a positive 10. And I know that in order to get a positive number, I have to have a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. Being this sign is positive, that means they'll both be positive terms. So I'm going to think about what I need to multiply together to get to 10. So I know 1 and 10, and I know 2 and 5. So I'm going to pick 2 and 5. The reason I'm picking 2 and 5 is if I add 2 and 5 together, I get positive 7. And then I'm going to make sure I put an x with each of those. So I get 5x squared plus 2x plus 5x plus 2. One more. Woo! Yeah, baby. All right. So I'm going to look here. What do I have in common between these 2 terms? I have an x. If I factor an x out of 5x squared, I'm left with 5x. If I factor an x out of 2x, I'm left with a 2. This doesn't have anything to factor, so I'm just going to factor 1 out because remember, 1 doesn't change anything. It just keeps it as is. So I have those are both the same, which we want. And then whatever I have left is going to go in my other set of parentheses. Okay, so same exact routine that we're going through. You have to realize it's okay to figure out what times what gives us the first and last multiplied together. That's what we're looking for. And then only one combination of those, if it factors, will work. Okay. All right, so let's try this one. So I have 3 terms. I want to make it 4. So I'm going to multiply those together. So that gives me negative 12. In order to get a negative, I know I have to have a positive and negative when I multiply together to give me a negative number. So the factors of 12 are 1 times 12, 2 times 6, and 3 times 4. So we're going to look. We're going to say, okay, I need to get to be a negative 1. So that means I'm going to have a negative 4 and a positive 3. If I add negative 4 and positive 3 together, I get negative 1. So those are my terms. I need to remember to put an x with both of those. So I'm going to get 4x squared plus 3x minus 4x minus 3. Now I have 4 terms. I'm going to say, what can I factor out of both of those? It looks like I can factor an x out. If I factor an x out of 4x squared, I'm left with 4x. If I factor an x out of 3x, I'm left with 3. This sign comes down. Looks like I'm just going to factor a negative 1 out because nothing else is in common. So that's going to give me a positive 4x and a positive 3. Being these are the exact same, that means it's going to factor. And whatever I have left is going to be that. And so again, if I were to multiply this together by double distributing, it would give me the 4x squared minus 1x, which is the same thing as minus x, minus 3. Okay? So I'm going to go, I have a couple more. I got one more problem. So let's do this. So let's make some steps. If 3 terms, then make 4 terms. Second step, multiply the first, and I'm going to say could be 1, and last, determine if it's positive, positive, negative, negative, or one of each. List all factors of the 2 numbers multiplied, which is the first and the last. Look to see which set of factors with signs add to the middle. Now 4 terms. So factor by grouping. Okay, so those are the steps needed to factor, okay? So I'll leave that for a sec. Go ahead and write that down. I need to go blow my nose real quick. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back, friends. Did you have enough time to write those steps down? All right. Ooh, take my mask off. Whew. All right. Wait, that one, is that the last one? That was the last one. Okay. All right, my friends. I'll start this, but I want you to start adding to it. I have 3 terms. We want to make up 4. So what's my next step? What's my next step to do to start breaking it into 4 terms? What do you think? Anybody?
Multiply 4x squared by 6.
Yeah, so I'm going to multiply the 4 times the 6. Good. So that's going to give me positive 24. And it can either be positive, positive, or negative, negative. So then I'm trying to answer this question here. Being that's positive, they both have to be positive. So list me all the factors of 24. I'll do 1 times 24. What's another set of numbers that multiply to give me 24?
2 times 12.
2 times 12. What's another set of numbers that would add up to that?
3 times 8.
3 times 8. And is there anything else that multiplies to give me 12? Or 11? Or 24, excuse me. One more set. Don't forget the 4 times 6. Okay. So which of those, when added together, they're both going to be positive. So is 1 and 24, when I add it together, give me 11? Not this week. If I add 2 and 12 together, do I get 11? If I add 3 and 8 together, does that give me 11? I think so. And 4 and 6, that would just give me 10. So that's going to be positive and positive. Okay. So don't forget to add the x's to it. So let's break it into 2 terms. So I get 4x squared. What comes next? You pick.
That'll be plus 3x.
Plus 3x. Okay, plus 3x goes there. Then that must mean plus 8x goes there. And then bring your last term down. Okay, so we're going to take a look here. So it looks like I can factor an x out because 4xx and 3x. If I factor an x out of 4xx, I'm left with 4x. If I factor an x out of 3, I'm left with 3. This sign comes down. Looks like I can factor a 2 out of both of those. If I factor 2 out of 8x, that leaves me 4x. And if I factor a 2 out of 6, that leaves me 3. Those are the same. That's what I want. And in the other set of parentheses, I put whatever I have left. And that's it. How do you feel? Seem okay? Okay, so my assignment is going to be PEF number 9. And we're going to do the odds. So I'm going to say that 1, 3, and 5, we just multiply them out. And then 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, and 17 are what we just did. It's the new. So those are the only ones that you need to do. You don't need to do anything beyond that on PEF. So if you want to go ahead and start them, go ahead. And I'm going to stop recording.